friends. This is a special episode of The Practiced Life, a longer conversation that I had with the man who wrote the international best-selling book, Start in Your Own Backyard, Transforming Where We Live with Radical Common Sense. His name is Steve Nygren, and not only is he a best-selling author, he's worldwide renowned for what's called biophilic real estate development, where he has a special set of guiding principles that he uses to develop land. He has built a gorgeous town in the Southeast. And after many, many, many years of looking for where I would be most home based after all my years in Chicago, um, I found a place to root in the city, the village, the hamlets that he designed 20 years ago. And so this episode is all about how I found a place to root. You're going to hear his very unique tenets about how to create a place that is more like the way we used to live 80 years ago, more connected, healthier, more joyous. It's really it's a mind-blowingly fascinating conversation, and I hope it gives you a lot of hope that you too can find a place to root or make the place you're living right now that much better. Thanks for listening. The book is called Start in Your Own Backyard, Transforming Where We Live with Radical Common Sense, says Steve Nygren, who is the founder of Serenbe, my hometown of the last 2.5 years. And so I want to start by saying, have you been interviewed by somebody who lives here? Somebody who used to live here?
I don't think, let's see, I'll have to think. Not on a podcast and not on a podcast of your scale.
Listen, I know what I'm talking about because
I know.
I have lived here for 2.5 years. I remember thinking, Steve, as I was setting sail to move here through a series of coinky dinky divine guidance. Tracy Matchett's here tonight. She's the one who, I didn't know her then. She sent me an email to my website, and I saw the homepage of Serenbe, serenbe.com, and I said, oh, I'm supposed to live there. And it all unfolded pretty quickly. But here's what so I'm going to talk about the book, and then I want to talk about your vision, and I want to talk about my observations about you. Because now that I live here, now that I've been to some city council meetings, and now that I'm in the fabric of things, here's what I can see. What you've done is actually impossible. You know what I'm right. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible to say, I'm going to take the middle of a forest and I'm going to get you all to buy in on that this is going to be a thriving, amazing community, having amazing conversations and connection and well-being and all the things. Honestly, it was an impossible thing you did. Don't you see that?
I do not.
No, I know you don't. You are undaunted.
But it's the reason I wrote the book, because I think many times we see things as impossible to accomplish. And I did not walk in saying, hey, you should all follow me, and I have a great idea, because I didn't. I came with a concern that our beautiful rural countryside, so close to Atlanta, was going to be destroyed. And I just started meeting with neighbors and say, how do you feel about it? Oh, I'm concerned about it too. And why don't we do something about it instead of waiting until somebody else decides what they want to do and then decide we don't like it? And I find that too few times we have conversations with neighbors and empowering ourselves to make change. And so that's the whole reason I wrote the book. It wasn't about telling people about Serenbe, although I use that as the foundation. It was to inspire people, hey, you can really change where we live. Don't wait for big governments and big corporations to do it. Big change rarely has happened that way.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. And I want to get into some of your tent poles and some of your guiding principles When I start talking about it, it sounds like I'm talking about a cult. It's a cult of good, people. It's a cult of goodness. There is something that I think everybody who listens to this conversation and participates in this conversation can benefit from. It's I You described it in the book and I went, "Oh, that is the thing. That's the bat signal that brought me here." You put up the bat signal, Steve Nygren, and people have come from all over the world to
That's
live here.
right.
And here's what you talked about because you experienced it yourself. You experienced what you call a values shift. You were a super successful restaurateur,
That's right.
living the high life in Atlanta, on all the boards, going to the la-di-da balls, raising your gorgeous family, all the things. And you had a value shift. Tell us about that.
We exactly. You explained my life. It was beautiful. I thought we were had climbed the ladder of success, and it was perfect. And it's those unintended things that kind of knock you in the head, and it's to have the courage to look at it. And that's what happened to us. We an afternoon drive to the country to look at rural land that was so close to Atlanta that we saw in the Georgia Preservation newsletter advertising a historic farm. We had no intentions of buying anything. I just called them and said, "Hey, if you have farm animals, I'd love to pull in, and we're going to take a drive to see this open country." And of course, anyone with something for sale said, "Come on." We arrived. They had the Shetland ponies saddled, and I bought the farm.
Oh, it's those settled Shetland ponies that'll get you every time. Oh,
It's at least I had the courage to follow my heart rather than the logical reason that it made no sense. I know, and that's what life should be more about. We've forgotten how to follow our hearts.
yes, yes, and that's what I mean to say. Yes, and here is what has happened so brilliantly. Your value shift allowed you to start dreaming a dream. You were a little outside your scope.
We were, and this is so what happened is I bought the farm
Yes.
thinking we'd come down a couple Saturday afternoons a month. We rented the old house out, and my wife fixed the shack in the back in case we ever wanted to spend the night. And it's where we started coming every weekend, leaving that big house with the pool and the Barbie rooms for all those darling little girls and the battery operated Barbie car. It was everything I could possibly imagine getting them for happiness. And they could have cared less. They preferred the shack and the woods and the connection to nature. And watching that through their eyes, I was able to come back to what really matters in life.
Oh my God. That is for sure. And so fast forward on that, basically, if we were just to go through the I'll just read it from the book that you you walked the trails, you realized the tentacles of dysfunction could destroy your rural paradise, and you decided to launch an effort to save your own backyard, creating the Chattahoochee Hill Country Alliance to bring landowners, developers, and conservationists for a mutually agreed upon solution for balanced growth across 40,000 acres. Now, golly jeepers, that is a lot. That is a lot. We've looked at satellite shots of the last 20 years and the 48,000 acres that you basically put your Steveness on. It's still mostly forest, 70%.
That's right. And it will be 70% forever. And it's mostly because what we came together as a community to decide, and this took a couple years. This wasn't, I don't say it was difficult. It just took time and communication and thought in pulling everyone together to understanding what everyone's concerns and hopes were. But any developers that were thinking about coming that way, they didn't understand what we were doing. And so they basically turned around and found land elsewhere where they could just scrape it all bare and put whatever they wanted in. And we were talking about wellness real estate, about biophilic designs, words that were not uttered 25 years ago.
Sacred geometry.
Oh,
No,
yeah. And so
no developer was talking about that.
nobody was. And so now, 25 years later, after the recession, after the pandemic, All these terms, all these concerns now are at the forefront. The big real estate companies are talking about nature forward development, about the the wellness, the Global Wellness Institute invited me 11 years ago to talk to their international conference in Marrakesh. I was the only developer identifying as wellness real estate. Today, there are so many that it's a complete separate conference for the last 3 years. And the last one was hosted by JP Morgan Chase on Madison Avenue with 400 developers from 36 countries. Things are changing, Sherry.
Things are changing. Things are changing. So this value shift, which is, I think, is something, it's a good nugget for everybody who is here with us to really give some thought to that. What are your values? And to see that there are a lot of people who have shifted their values later in life to create a whole nother different version of their lives. When I read your book, and you really lay this out so beautifully. So even if you're not going to develop land, even if you don't think there's so much you can do in your town, what I get from this book is it's more of a commitment to living life a new way, to
Exactly.
look at your neighborhood and your town and your own life and your choices and start to, just like Serenbe and Chat Hills is a living laboratory, you call it, for a new way of living. These are things that we can do in our own lives by just considering our values and then making some shifts. So, what would you say are the big pillars of that?
The big thing as I really looked at it is, and now the research post-pandemic is coming out, is the importance of connecting to nature. This is huge. And this was what pulled my kids just in. Children are naive. And while they might like the expensive toys and the trappings, what they have that pure heart, then and they were totally drawn to the natural nature, to to the sounds, the birds, the worms running barefoot in the land. And that is such an important thing. And Richard Louv, years later, after we moved here, wrote the book Last Child in the Woods, really showing how important it was. The other thing is connection to one another. And the research post-pandemic shows those are the two things that affect mental health. Yet we've been building places for people to live over the last 5, 6 decades that separate us from both of those. And then we wonder why we're more depressed and unhappy than we've ever been. And what I don't understand is why aren't we all asking why?
Right.
Why are we willing to accept business as usual when it's making our children, the people we love, unwell?
Yeah, that is one of the magical things about what you have created here as an example for that people come from all over the world to come and see. So I'm thinking about the places I've lived. I made some big moves. I was in Chicago downtown for 30 years in a vintage condo, and I waved at my neighbors, but we weren't hanging out. I lived in LA in Los Feliz for maybe 3 or 4 years, and I was behind a gate. The only people I saw on a regular basis, I paid. The guy who's cutting the hedges and my housekeeper. And then I was like, okay, I want nature. I moved to Napa Valley to St. Helena, and I just loved that ruralness. I loved the fact that there was a world-class thing going on and there was this ruralness. But again, people didn't go there to connect with neighbors unless you were in the wine industry. I didn't know the people who lived on the other side of the fences in my backyard. So when I got here, it was shocking. I mean, I was like, oh my God, people are waving and stopping and knocking at my door. And what do I need? And do I need meals? And I was like, wow, this is really different. Now, the thing that was great about it is the people are real cool
That's
because
right.
you've got to sign up. Your values have to, you don't come here unless your values have shifted and you want something different. You want something, you want to connect to nature. You want to have a organic farm. 2 blocks away. You want to have local little businesses, just like the mom and pop days. You don't want to go to a big old gigantic super mall. You want a different kind of life. However, you still want the exciting, expansive conversation. And that's what is accomplished here. How'd that happen?
I Number one is we realized that art was an important piece of, sorry about that. We realized that art was an important part of the community. And so we made art a foundation.
We did.
And if you remember Florida's book, The Creative Class, we have actually created a place that attracts the creative class. And I think everybody, whether no matter what field they're in, they're a creative sensibility about them. And the other key thing we've done, because it's not logical. So anyone moving to Serenbe is someone who is able to touch hope.
Yeah.
And a pessimistic person will not generally move to Serenbe because they don't think it can be real. So if
Yeah.
you have a community full of creatives who have hope, you literally feel the difference.
You absolutely can. And I will say to everybody who's listening and then watches this recording later, go to serenbe.com. Check it out. It's super cool. Right on the homepage is our stable that we call Soul Barn now, with sound baths and all kinds of great things. There's an inn, come and visit, come see us. It's an awesome experience just to visit here. However, the things that Steve is talking about in this book are things about, it's about how, what kinds of choices and decisions do we make about our lives? And I think, Steve, why I recommend this book so highly is I do think that we're a little down on the hope gas, sir. We're hope is running a little bare here and there, and it makes me chuckle to hear you say this wasn't hard. It just took a lot of. I'm like, oh my God, that is the understatement of the millennium. You and I have a different definition of hard. I would say that must have been really hard. Remember, I called it impossible. So, how do we, adopting some of these principles and taking all your beautiful gems and your kind of instructions for living that you dropped in this book, how can we be more hopeful in these times?
I think the big thing is to analyze the things that are bothering you. Can you make a difference? And if you can't make a difference, if you do not have a seat at that table, then you might as well stop worrying about it because whatever's going to happen. But instead, use your talents, use your energy for things you can improve and you can change. Maybe that's the food for your own family. Maybe that's getting rid of a lawn that you have to chemicalize that's maybe making your family sick, and look at how you could change it. And talk to your neighbors. It literally was not hard, what I consider hard, because I just started engaging neighbors, sitting at their kitchen table initially. That wasn't hard. Then we started calling meetings, and Marie, my wife, would bake cookies, peach cobbler, and all kinds of things. And people would show up for the food and meeting and conversations with their neighbors. And together, no matter what, if we were looking to monetize our land or save our land, we were all able to talk and not judge of what we each thought was important. And then together we were able to find something that brought us all what we wanted. So it took a lot of coffees, a lot of desserts, and then eventually public meetings. But
Yes,
we were able to bring 80% of the landowners together. And the
great.
20% that didn't support us also never opposed us. They just stayed home.
That is really absolutely amazing. I just want, Cord, if you can throw up the link again. Our local town bookstore, our friend Shri just bought it, Hills and Hamlets. We're going to put up that link again. You can get your copy of Start in Your Own Backyard from there, and it goes to bookshop.org. That makes me feel so happy. Shri, Shri, go Shri. We support our local
Yeah.
businesses. Yeah,
And the other thing, because I know a lot of these businesses are owned by women.
Yeah.
Now, and I think that's the other key thing is women make decisions differently. And you see how much we rely on so that approach, whether you're a man or a woman, to hit that emotionally more natural, our streets curve rather than being these straight linear. And arts and things like that, when in Jung psychology, the masculine and feminine doesn't deal with your sex, it deals with your attitude and how you look at things. And we need more of this. Rather than power, we need decisions coming from the heart and to the heart. And exciting is so many of our businesses at Ceramby are actually operated and owned by women. And I think that's the other thing that has a ripple effect that you feel.
Yeah. So if I was sitting, yeah, and let me just jump in on there and say we have front porches. We don't have lawns, as you were saying. We don't have mailboxes. You have to go to a common area, and meet your neighbors while you get your mail. There's all kinds of little design decisions that are made so we are always interacting. And like Steve said, here is what's I could kick myself for this, but I lived in downtown Chicago. I was working 120 hours a week, so don't be too harsh on me. But there were best museums and all kinds of things. Did I ever go? No. But now I live in the middle of a forest and I'm seeing ballet and opera and chamber music and films and I come home on my electric golf cart. It takes me 2 minutes to get home and I I a little bit. I get teary-eyed because I'm like, art and this kind of art, this experience just expands me so in such a wide way. It makes my heart just burst. And I deprived myself of that for so many years when I was living in the city. And so I think if you're listening to this, what Steve has been saying is it's get out in nature, go meet your neighbors, bake a pie and bring it over, a cobbler, a peach cobbler, go to a play, go see the music thing that's happening near you. It's like there are ways for you to bring this kind of living into your life, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And many of the things, whether people think of it as a cult or utopia or idealism or impossible, and yet if you question anyone who was born more than a half a decade ago, all of these things were part of the way people lived 80 years ago plus. That was what community was. And we have so stepped away from these things that they now seem unusual. And that's the sad part. And that's why I hope more people say, hey, this maybe isn't working for us. All the statistics show that it's not. We have a health crisis and a mental health crisis in America. All the trends show it's not changing, it's getting worse. And so we have to ask the questions, we have to ask individually what we can each do to change it for us, our loved ones, and our neighbors. And if we all did that, my goodness, all of our backyards touch.
Oh, and if our backyards can touch, so can our hearts. That's what it makes me think. You have this great section in here, and this is this lit me up a little bit when Raina was touring me. One of the top real estate agents here was touring me around. That you are in process of beginning to build an aging in place situation, but you have some very different views about how to do that. You want to talk about that?
Absolutely. Just had a talk for the Urban Land Institute with the people building those. And we as a country are fascinated with the blue zones where people live longer. And so I was able to put a list of how those places are, how they're built, how they're designed, and then what America is doing and many times requiring in the regulations. And it's the absolute opposite. We're building places where the focus is on luxury, which creates a lifestyle that is luxury. We worry about where the elevator is, how thick the carpet is, how big the moldings are. And that's not luxury as you're aging. And yet I look at the blue zones, they don't have elevators. They have hills and steps. And it creates an active lifestyle rather than a luxurious lifestyle. And that has very different outcomes. And the in Sweden, they talked about they do all of the color schemes from primary colors. I went in one and it had red carpets or red sofas and big yellow pillows, and it was just bright. And they said they use primary colors like you do nursery schools because keeping the mind active at the end of the life is the same as the beginning. And so that's a complete different look and approach. And we are not going to have age restrictions. It's it's set that if you have a health event or are worried about it, this is what it's built for. And so all those things are there, but it's to keep you active. I was recently at a conference and the head of John Hancock spoke, and he said 95% of our cost goes to fixing people's illness, and only 5% in America is preventive. And that's a big problem. You see, that's very different at Serenbe. We have all these providers that are keeping you vital, and it's preventive, and that's what the Aging in Place campus is going to be. It's about preventing those unbelievable areas. And I believe I knew five of my great grandparents, and I learned from them about live well and die well. And we're not doing that in America. We're spending so much money in the last 18 months of life trying to hold on to one more month. And so it's a complete attitude we need to change.
Yeah, and you don't want to separate the aging in place people from the kids, and you want that vitality still. You've got a real, I must tell you, you have a real touch. You have a real instinct for what will land, what will work, what could be successful, even though I imagine you've been experimenting all along. How, I've lived in some really good places. How do you begin to build community? What have you learned about that, Steve?
I think it's to step back and think about, that's why I call it common sense. And it's really a respect for one another and for nature. And if you see all this, it becomes pretty natural. Now, unfortunately, we have a lot of rules and regulations that prohibit it. So I had to do some fights to actually do what I felt was necessary and important and natural. And so I talk
Are
about
you
that.
talking about laws like zoning laws?
Yeah, like zoning laws. I talk in the book about the unintended consequences over all the years. And there's a lot, but I start with President Eisenhower put the interstate system in for military purposes. It's never been used for that, but it's defined how we have expanded and built community. Then there's, for whatever reasons, we decided that we wanted to segregate the type of housing. There was this real attitude that we didn't want those people that were different than us to live next door.
Right.
And so we started regulating the types. And so suddenly small houses have to be in one area and larger houses another, and commercial has to be in another. We don't want anybody going to a restaurant after 7 o'clock if children are in the house. These crazy things that we have sanitized our zoning to where we've taken the vitality out of where we live.
Right.
And we have to drive to all of it. We can't walk to most of it because of this segregation in zoning.
So when you started, you looked at, I found this so fascinating in trying to figure out how are we going to do something different where we have more preserve the nature? Because somewhere along the line, gosh, and maybe this is my parents too. My dad was the first one in his family to graduate from college. And it was, you would have your little half acre of lawn land, your new suburban house. I grew up in a tri-level outside of Waukegan, Illinois, and it was brand spanking new neighborhood subdivision, they called it. That's real romantic subdivision. And they basically, there wasn't a tree that was older than 2 months. When we finally, my parents moved 20 something years later, the two trees they had planted were like tall, but yeah, that was That and that they had made it. That
That's
was
right.
they wouldn't even look at like the charming neighborhoods with the towering oak trees. It was like, oh, those houses are old. There was a weird, funky thing that happened.
That's right. And it was from the development and people. We had a real fascination with efficiency and the idea that the bigger piece of land you could have and the bigger house you could have, the more successful you were. And so the more, reasonable property. So everybody kept going further and further out. And we had cars that could get us out to those places.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we just kept doing that and doing that until now we're spending all of our time in cars going to where we need to because we kept doing that. And then the measurement was the more toys you could have. If you could have a pool or your own tennis court or your own movie theater or your own cappuccino machine. And then we put a fence around those so that somebody couldn't steal our toys. And since everybody had it, and the developers value engineered sidewalks because nobody was walking from one place to another, so we didn't have sidewalks. And then you turn around and look at it, and we've created prisons
Yeah.
for us and our families, and we didn't even realize it.
Oh my gosh. I'm looking over in the chat there and I'm seeing Courtney posted hills and hamlets. That's where I live, in a place that's made of hills and hamlets. It's it's like you were inspired by the villages in the English countryside, yes?
That's right. That's right. We had a friend, Marie's adopted grandmother, whom she'd met. And so we went over to Selborne, England, which is southwest between London and Bath. And I learned a lot about the English land laws because after World War II, they realized they couldn't afford urban sprawl because the island was only so big.
Right.
And so you have a lot of people living in these hamlets, villages, and town, but it still feels very country. So I said, why can't we do that in America?
Yeah. And then you've broken all the rules because here, condos, estate homes, this and that, everything is side by side along with businesses
That's
or
right.
little businesses. And it just creates these charming hamlets, hamlets that are around this in our village. And our village is situated in this 40,000 acre town that you are responsible for, along with others, for creating. It really is a marvel. So I'm going to move on to this because I was thinking we were talking about after the suburbs and the subdivisions. I was thinking, oh, TV dinners. I remember that TV dinner was a treat. If you
Yeah.
remember those TV dinners,
Oh,
John?
yeah.
Oh, some people aren't old enough. Oh, that was a TV trays. Now we're not even at the table. We have TV trays and we have, what are you having? Which TV dinner do you want? Oh my God. I was like, it was turned into a big treat night. What do you have to say about food?
We have forgotten about nutrition when we look at food. And here again, it's been about a focus on cheaper food and the volume of food. And for the first time in civilization, we have malnutrition and obesity in the same body. What does that tell you? And so we really need to come back and understand our food system. It needs to return to a regional food system. And and for the listeners, we're really doing that. We're bringing an agrarian economy back to our greater area, and we have what we call homestead farmers. These are maybe some people whose ancestors used to farm, and they have gone off to the city, but they still own the land in small pieces. We have people stepping off of corporate America, or at least one member of a family doing that and starting to grow things because we can create an economy where they're selling fresh foods directly to their neighbors. And for kids, for anyone to know the person growing your food, and
Oh,
and that includes the protein. We've really gotten away from meats, and rightfully so, because they've been raised inhumanely and filled with chemicals. But it's very different if you have an animal that's pastured on chemical-free pastures and raised by someone who honors them for their role in the whole food system. It's very different. We used to host the camp for the James Beard for emerging chefs, so they really understood that entire arc of our food systems and honoring it, the farmers, the animals, the whole process that it comes. It's one of the critical things that we have to really look at. It's one of we saw how bad the pandemic was. That is mild what could happen if we have a serious food crisis or if our power grid goes out. And I think those are the two most vulnerable things we as Americans need to look at if you're looking at the bigger scale thing.
Well, and if you wrap that also in the conversation that you bring up in this about value shifting, I would say my grandparents had a food garden. They had a kitchen garden. They had tomatoes and corn and la-di-da and la-di-da. But for my mom and dad growing up, that was like old fashioned because the new supermarkets and meat wasn't in the shape of an animal, it's just in a plastic styrofoam thing. And that would be the way. That was supermarkets and getting everything processed. And I don't know how I stayed awake at school with my big bowl of Lucky Charms with about 100 grams of sugar in the morning. And my white bread sandwich filled with, how did I stay awake for school? I'm like, what I could have been if I'd have been properly nourished. But you make such a big deal about this. This is a very big deal to you. And I think it ties back to that whole thing about a healthy life system, a healthy life system, a healthy community with healthy food and healthy activities and healthy connection. It all really just, you're not kidding, it makes sense when you say it like that, doesn't it?
Total common sense.
It's total common sense. It's so crazy.
And the big thing, because I mentioned I knew five of my great grandparents, and I heard stories from them on their parents. My last great grandparent died when I was 14, so I knew them. I knew their lifestyle. I spent time with them. Now I realize the decisions they made affect my life today. What is it that we all are from 7 generations back?
Yeah.
I'm worried about my grandkids and their grandkids and how they're going to look back at the decisions we have made or allowed to be made for us without asking the questions. And that's also what drives me. You see me with my grandkids. Gosh, it's I understand how important it is. And I worry about the kind of world that we're leaving them. And I hope we all start asking the questions. For anyone born in the baby boomers, we were going to solve everything with drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And that didn't work out too well in the 60s. But we were the same generation that became the greed generation of the 90s. And so we're the only generation in the baby boomers that have lived the extremes on both sides. And so I hope that pendulum comes back to center and we get some centered in our own lives and start thinking about what we could do to really change where we live and join these young people because anyone under 30 has been born into a fragile world and they're not going to shrug and wait for it to pass or for somebody to fix it. They're asking the hard questions. And I'm hoping we can join them in really figuring out how we can take care of where we live and change it for the better.
Yeah, and you know what? As we get ready to wrap here, I want to say that here is one of the most important things to know as we're having this conversation. It doesn't matter where you are. It's not too late. It's not too late for you to have a major value shift. If you would have told me that I don't know if I could have imagined it. I couldn't have. If someone's like, you're gonna move to Georgia, what in the hell are you talking about? I'm moving to Georgia. And it is it's beyond my capacity to understand. And so, what I am learning from this experience, from being gobsmacked on a daily basis to watching my values really get reshaped, watching the way I move through community just change. I was like, no, yeah, don't ask me over or anything. And now I'm like jumping in the middle of everything, taking piano lessons and riding a horse named Steve Dash. I don't recognize myself, but here's my message. My message is it's not too late to allow your values to be shifted by wanting to live all the possibilities and wanting to have just a root connected life. That's really what you are writing about in this book of how to have a rooted, connected life that makes you feel good about being alive, that makes this human experience exponentially better. And that's really, this is like a little roadmap for how to, first of all, so inspiring to read your story of how you've done it and continue to do it, and so many wonderful ideas about how you can begin to do that for yourself. So thank you, good. Thank you.
Thank you for recognizing it. Thank you for following your heart to Serenbe and
Yeah.
allowing yourself to relook at the world. I think that's the big thing. I think everything you're talking about touches most people, but we have lived in a world where we've had to put a protective shell and we've forgotten how to open that shell.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this is about. If everyone would just getting out into nature allows you to breathe deeper and many times loosening that shell, that protective shell that we've all created because we live in places that are noisy and busy and intrusive. And nature isn't that. And that's the first step. Take a walk in nature
Yeah.
and think about this conversation and just relax. And everything we've talked about is natural. It's things we respond to as a human being. And that's the big thing.
And in your own value shift, and in now you spend all your time in nature, you're connected to all different kinds of people, you're with your grandchildren every single day. I don't know that I've met a more hopeful person than you in my life. I don't think I have. Who is that? The happy hugger woman? Maybe her. But I don't think I have. Even when, like I said, in order to even bring people to any kind of agreement, and you don't require that everybody agree with you. You say you like a little sandpaper in the mix, but you do not lose hope. And I take my inspiration from that because it begins with that, at least. Just knowing that, yes, we can rise above. Yes, we can expand. Yes, we can make our lives better. You're one choice away from a whole new life. Steve?
That's the whole thing. No, and I've written a book in a way that it can be used as a manual. And
Yes.
because you don't have to read it from cover to cover, you can flip to the chapter you want, come back to it, and mark it up. And we've put QR codes in so you can go really dig deeper in those places you want to do that. And it could be a manual for an HOA or a neighborhood or
I'm just going to read some of the chapter titles.
okay.
Life isn't working. The state of the world today. The farm that changed my life. What is biophilic design? Building a community while respecting nature. Common sense, energy, and water usage. It's super interesting. The power of inspired architecture, a fit community, healthful foods, better together, communicating the heart with art. It is a manual, and I think the QR codes are brilliant, by the way. I think that is brilliant. It just shows that you're just wanting to get the information out.
Absolutely. We want to share and inspire people to step forward. Another story, and I think some of your people, a lot of people may be listening, remember when we lived in smoke-filled rooms.
Oh,
I
yes.
never I
I
never
was a smoker.
imagined that I would live in a place in a time that we were smoke-free. That wasn't big corporations or governments. That was a group of airline stewardesses that decided they'd had enough of being locked into these tubes with smoke.
Yeah.
And they asked the airlines to make the last 5 seats, the ones nobody wanted, smoke free so they could have a space in the back of the plane that just wasn't filled with smoke.
Oh my
And
God.
all of a sudden, everybody started choosing the back of the plane. And the airline said, we'll do 10 more seats.
Yeah.
And all before long. And I remember we had the restaurants and National Restaurant Association suggested that we try the back corner for those people that might want to sit smoke free. My goodness, those were the worst tables suddenly were the most popular. And today we live in smoke-free environments, not because of governments, but because a group of individuals and because the market started choosing it.
Yeah,
And that's where we are today.
that's where we are today. Oh, yes. I remember booking the non-smoking section and then going to the smoking section to have a cigarette. That's what I remember. But that happened so fast, Steve. And it's such a great example because it goes from you're not cool unless you do to you're a social pariah if you do. And this way of living, this approach to living that you outline so beautifully, you teach this. This is a book about being taught how to have a life where your feet are on the ground. You're a grounded, happier, healthy person, and your family is the same. You're an extraordinary teacher. And I see the people coming from all over the world to learn how to do it. So I am hopeful. I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that you are the beginning of an explosion of people who say this is possible and this is what we want.
Absolutely. And I look at you. You walk the streets with hope, and that's not the case when you arrived at Serenbe.
No. Yeah. Listen, the minute I saw it, I was like, woo. Yeah. You know what? Because it's an energy, it's a vortex, it's an energy. The energy is about hope and possibility. So, yeah, you can read that pretty quickly. Thank you very much. Everybody, grab your copy. I think you will really love it. You're gonna love the juicy details of how he did this. How he made his decisions because it is a tale to be told, sir.
And those three daughters and my wife have been important pieces of that. Now
Oh
the
my
three
gosh.
daughters have all returned and they're running the business.
And I love your daughter so much. I love your daughters. Your wife and I just was her secretary. I was her assistant. We had a neighbor's dinner with District 2, the chat choose dinner, which is, how you guys all believe you get together over dinner. You got to be neighbors and friends. Yes, your family is really, they're living the life. They're really living the life. Yeah, I had a workshop here and a bunch of the people here tonight came and spent the weekend here. And so and they got the good feeling. They got the good feeling.
That's great.
Steve, may your feet be wings and bring you home tomorrow quickly. And thank you for doing this for us tonight and for really including us in your on your teaching tour. And I hope you sell a gazillion copies of this book.
Thank you for sharing this with your audience. Enjoy the conversation.
That was Steve Nygren, author of Start in Your Own Backyard, Transforming Where We Live with Radical Common Sense. I love this book. I think it's a little handbook for a new way to live. I've been living by these principles for the last 3 years, living in my own new rooted home. And I have to say, never been happier, never been healthier, never felt more connected to community. Thanks for listening to everyone, and I'll see you the next time on The Practice Life.